This tutorial is niche. But you're here, so that means your mind is as weird and wonderful as mine is. So welcome to my very specific tutorial on how to paint a guy to look like he's made of water. If you're new here, hi, my name is Srish and I like to set myself some ridiculous art challenges. By the way, if you want me to set you some ridiculous art challenges, come join my Discord server because we have a community art challenge going on. It is low effort and completely free, and I promise you it will make you a much better artist by the end of July. Link to my Discord server is in the description. Now, for those of you who remember, we did a painting of a crazy fire guy last month where we gave him a head that was literally just a flame. And I thought this time I wanted to paint a water guy, but instead of just giving him a head made of water, I thought why not just paint him to be entirely made of water? So that's exactly what we're going to do today. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to paint a bunch of different types of water texture and also how to manipulate the texture so it still looks clear and wet and wavy while also molding it into the object of your choice. As always, remember to like and subscribe for more art content. Comment below how you're going to use this skill in your own work. And without much further ado, here's my very niche, very specific tutorial on how to paint a guy and make it look like he's made of water. Okay, so adding to our Zodiac expansion series, our next element is water. This is the positive aspect of water. So I had this idea for a really playful, pretty energy. And while the fire guy had a flame head and a human body, for this one, I really wanted to push it with this piece and just paint him to look like he was entirely made of water. Also, he's holding a goldfish in a glass because fish and drinking are often associated with water signs. It's really all about being playful, having fun, laughing, and just a good times vibe, you know? The other thing that affects the water on our planet is the moon. The moon creates tides, right? So I did a giant crescent moon behind him, and this will actually really help our rendering. So I'll explain that a little later. For the flat, I mostly just kept to a deep blue cyan vibe. This is going to be a nighttime scene, obviously, but there's actually a reason I want most of the base tones to be pretty dark, which, again, I'll get into in a sec. The biggest element of contrast, though, is going to be that goldfish. I wanted that bright orange to really pop nice and loud against all the blue, and because everything else is going to be fairly analogous, that goldfish will likely draw our eye very quickly. So I also really wanted lots of leading lines going out from that goldfish towards our character, sort of like a subtle guide that grabs your eye first and then gently walks you through the rest of the painting. I'm gonna preface this by saying that this piece was an exercise in trusting the process. The face was my trial zone, so ignore that and let's get into the render. First thing we want to establish is transparency. Water, famously transparent. And this is actually an excellent thing for us as artists because it's quite easy to sell a texture as water. All you gotta do is paint the background elements to show through your water, but just make it a little distorted and less well defined. So first, I just started by painting the body how I'd usually paint an opaque person, but as if they had blue skin. We know that the primary light source is going to be the moon, so a lot of the light is going to hit the higher planes, especially around his jaw, neck and shoulders. It then gets gradually darker as you go away from the moon. I also added some texture to his hair, but it does just get painted over later. Also, I decided that the back of his little open jacket thing could be opaque, because that way it'll be an area of darkness against what we're about to do. I then grabbed a massive airbrush set to overlay blending mode, a light blue, and really intensify the area that lies just in front of that moon. And this is why I really included that giant crescent, because now we can sell the transparency. This is also why I wanted the rest of the scene to be darker. It really pushes the contrast, and because his body is able to show both the super bright and super dark values, it means very little of the background is actually being obstructed by him. Which again really works with the idea of water as an element. It isn't about solid obstructions. Water manipulates the world in a slow, gentle way. I also heightened the contrast in his face, where the area above his mouth is in relative darkness, while that jaw is much brighter. I created some ripples in his face and neck, and this was just me grabbing brighter values and creating wavy lines, then blending some edges out. Obviously, this whole process was intuitive because it's really hard to find references for humanoid water. And I also refuse to use AI-generated images as references because ew. At this point, I'd already been painting for a couple of hours and my brain wasn't braining, so I left him alone and worked on the background a little. I actually made that moon a little warmer because that will also give us some nice color variation within the glow. Much as I love a complementary palette, it can be a little too simplistic. Painting that goldfish was super fun because I really got to make him look completely shook, like bro has never seen the world from this vantage point. It's okay, fish, it's just a prank, bro. I also hand painted some gold on his skirt, and I actually did a short tutorial last week about adding a vector pattern to his vest, so that's up here if you want to watch it after. Okay. Back to our guy. Ignore the white highlights on his face, they go away later. For now, I decided to start on the torso because arguably that's the easiest, flattest part of him. I decided to paint some ripples going towards that little stream of water coming out of him. Again, this was the easy bit because it's basically just some narrow waves. It's almost like texturing hair in an impressionistic way. Some of it catches the light, the shadowy bits blend into each other. Or like we saw in the material transference video, it's like the spaces between mountaintops. If you know, you know. If you don't, the video will be here in the cards for later. Next, I decided to tackle his arm, and this is where things start to pick up. I actually started with a super bright outer edge and then a dark line just inside of it, which then blends into the midtone of his arm. Some of it on the edge or surface reflects back super bright, but the rest of it goes straight through. It doesn't stay bouncing around just under the surface, so the area just inside of that bright edge is actually going to appear really dark because the light has gone straight through. The light goes straight through and it creates a sort of glow in the main body of water. In this case, that's the bicep area, so I created a bit of brightness up there. Now, on top of it, I wanted to create this sort of wave pattern that looks like layers of nerve clusters, like this pattern, right? See how it looks like clusters of astrocytes? I started by sort of replicating those shapes with a blue that was slightly lighter than the color of the arm, then overlaid smaller, tighter shapes with an even paler blue, and then on top of that I picked the lightest blue and added even smaller little ripples. I then grabbed a deep cyan and intensified some shadows around that upper arm, and immediately it adds a lot of depth and dimension to the whole thing. We're going to repeat that process for the forearm as well, creating those layered nerve clusters. And doesn't that look just like sea foam? I love that little bit of the painting. Now that works because the arm is mostly made of large plane shapes. The hand, however, has lots of smaller forms, and it is also surrounded by a lot of action. The goldfish, the glass, the little streams of water coming from the guy and filling said glass. It's a lot going on. So I decided to just keep the hand simple, just paint a bit of transparency at the fingers and by the heel of the palm where the moon is, and that's pretty much it. The context clues from the rest of his body will help the viewer assume it's water. It's fine. So at this point, we've painted still water in the hand, ripples in the torso, and clusters of sea foam in the arm. Now, the face really had me bamboozled because which of these do I do and how do I make it conform to the three-dimensional form of his face? I started off painting a little bit of that seafoam texture on his cheek, but then decided, hey, what if there's waves crashing on the edge of his face? Like man's jaw is so sharp it causes water to crash against it. Ah, that's gold. So I pretty much just simplified the rest of the skin, just painted it like you would an opaque face, but then added these crashing waves right at the edge. It's just some really light blue forming the foamy bits, a little bit of shadow just inside of the highlight, and then blend the shadow into the rest of the face. Boom, waves. I went in and did the same thing on the other side of his face, more waves, and then just painted some random texture on his forehead. And then I enjoyed those tiny waves so much, I actually brought some of those shapes down onto his torso. I feel like it really breaks up the monotony of those ripples that are pretty much all going in one direction. It adds a sort of depth to his torso, as if the ripples are coming towards that stream in these giant waves. Alright, let's tackle the most confusing and most unhinged part of this piece, the hair. How the heck do you show hair but it isn't even hair? The obvious choice for the upper crown area was those ripples. Like we saw earlier, it's basically like painting hair. The light catches texture, the shadowy bits disappear into each other. However, I also decided to switch things up so it doesn't literally just look like human hair but painted blue. I decided to show the edges of the sections with crashing waves, like the ones we painted at his jaw. Oh yeah. I really love how it looks like water, but also a little bit like tentacles, like octopuses and squids and jellyfish that live deep in the ocean, right? We love a happy little accidentally cool effect. I don't know how it turned out looking super cool, but I like it and I decided to just not touch it ever again. Do you guys ever get that random fear? Like you've painted something so well, but you just know you will be tempted to work on it to a point where you end up ruining it? Because I do, and yeah, I just decided to leave it alone for the rest of eternity. I simplified the glass he's holding because, again, there's already plenty noise in that area. I did want to paint this like lotus-shaped glass because a lot of cultures associate lotus blossoms with water entities and deities. But yeah, it's a lot going on there, so I just turned it into a regular glass. I painted some larger waves right in front of him at the bottom of the piece just to really integrate our character into the setting. Up until this point, it was like he was separate from the background. Adding a vague foreground element and pushing our character into the midground instead is a really quick way to make him part of the scene. I also added some dull gold detailing to his jacket and a gold necklace. It breaks up the blues with some small shapes, but I kept it fairly dull so as not to take away too much attention from our goldfish. I decided to take a little extra time just to blend out a lot of the hard edges, particularly in the dark mid-tone to shadow areas. Water doesn't have any hard edges underneath the surface, so we really just want those textures to be limited to the areas that would reflect the light, i.e. the highlights. I also decided to go in with a soft brush and add the tiniest bit of greeny tones to the highlights. That blue was almost overwhelming. And again, the palette was looking a little too simplistic with just blue and orange. But I realized there was a little bit of red going on with our goldfish pal, and since green is a natural complement to red, it would be some lovely hue variation within the water, but without upsetting the color scheme. After sleeping on the painting for a day, I came back and realized his right eye was just completely off. It was way too low on the head. This is why breaks are so important, you guys. It's like when people had eyebrow blindness and now looking back at their old selfies, they realize just how bad it looked back in the day. Going away for a bit and coming back to a painting is the same way. It can really show you areas of glaring error that you completely missed because you were so used to your painting looking a certain way at the time. But anyway, I hope this was a helpful tutorial on how to paint water in a bunch of different ways, and most of all, a crash course in why it's so important to trust the process and push through the ugly stage of a painting. Also, I don't ever want to do this again because it was so hard, but I know that I will invariably end up doing it again just to see if I can. But what do you guys think? Where do you see yourself applying this weird and wonderful skill in your own work? Let me know in the comments below. Of course, if you've enjoyed this video and learned something today, let me know by giving it a big thumbs up and subscribing to my art channel for even more art content coming your way. And if you want to join my Discord server challenge, by the way, it is going on all through this month. I'll leave a link in the description. Come make some new art friends. Plus, I'm planning to put out new art prints soon as well because I feel like I finally have enough good art that I want to send out as prints. So I will be working on that very soon, and that goes out to my patrons as well. So link is up here and in the description, and thank you so much for your support. Finally, if you want a polar opposite but just as niche and specific tutorial about painting a fire guy, check out this video here in the outro. It should come up in just a sec. I did a tutorial a couple weeks ago about how to paint fire lighting on a human body, and I think you'll really find that helpful. And yeah, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I really hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Check out that other tutorial down here, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!